equity in it and you sell it, you walk away tax-free. There are 7 buckets and just perpetuate the cycle. And that's what the Rockefellers and the big banks in Canada and in North America do. It's the crumbs that are left on the table that goes to the second person. Right. And if everything goes down the drain, that money will be lost. You're basically just taking a risk, and it's too much of a risk for people to take. Refinanced it once, the money that was pulled out, we used to buy another property. We refinanced again, the money that was used after that, we used to buy another property, and then we refinanced it again, and the money that was pulled out, we used to buy another property. So my wife and I always call it the goose that keeps laying the golden egg. I stay away from pre-construction condos. Single family homes are for you and your family to live in. They're not really an investment. And that's how some families just pass Imagine a family that has a windfall of 10 million, tax-free, and they know what to do with it.
Today, I'm joined with Dr. Kola, who's an entrepreneur, co-founder of Repcall Group, and a specialist physician. He's also a seasoned real estate investor with a portfolio of over 200 units and more than 20 years of combined experience in healthcare, real estate, and assets management. So thanks, Dr. Kola, for being on this podcast today.
No, thank you very much, Tobi. It's nice to be here, for sure.
You're a physician, so you're already the top 1% earner. So what made you feel like you needed to build assets or like go into real estate or just investing in general? Because some people feel like, oh yeah, I'm already a top 1% earner. I've already made it. I only care about income. There's no need to do other things since my income covers my expenses.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question with different perspectives. I'm sure many people have different perspectives, but my perspective generally is, and I'll kind of approach it from a few different angles. First and foremost is that, when it comes to income generation, you have active income and you have passive income, and it's important for people, to aspire to have both, to have, an active income source, which is very often tied to your talent or your skill, the value that you bring, obviously, to people's lives and the problems that you solve, and is also tied to time. But more often than not, that requires your active involvement in the generation of that income from producing direct value. So that's active income. Then there's obviously passive income, which is the income that's generated when you're fast asleep.
Yeah.
And really, I think to build wealth, financial wealth, to qualify that specifically, it's important to have a combination of both sources, active income generation, passive income generation. So in the practice of medicine, which I've done for over 25 years now, and I really enjoy and I'm passionate, it really lends itself to both, where you have an active income source because sadly and unfortunately, people need healthcare, and you provide value and you provide solutions to people's problem from a healthcare point of view, and you get well remunerated for it. But then it also lends itself to a lot of passive income sources too, from other products and services and systems that you can put in place as a physician that generates additional income source. But I then went a step further than that, and some of this has its roots in my background, from way back in Nigeria, following my mom, who I always describe as the quintessential entrepreneur, and knowing that, having a business and running a business that can generate passive income, even when you have an active source of, income generation, really complements that wealth building, advantage or wealth building aspiration. And that's ultimately what led me to invest in real estate, which is one of my passions. It's one of the asset classes that I talk about quite often, and that I've invested in quite heavily, so that there is an active income source generation, there's a passive income source generation, and that really forms a significant part of financial wealth building. And I think most people who have an active income source would also start thinking, or should also start thinking, about what are the various passive income sources that they can invest in or that they can develop, so that even when they are absent, income is still generated, value is still added, problems are still solved, and ultimately impact is still made in people's lives.
I love that. I love that framing. So would you say people should focus more on like building their active income stream, like maybe main source of income, and then figure out how to build passively or invest in assets?
Yes, that would be my advice. There's no hard and fast rule. There's no hard and fast rule, but a general template would be to have an active income source, which could be the foundation of a core skill set or an area of interest, like an area of passion and interest, where there is value being added, where problems are being solved, where a difference is being made in people's life, and there's generating income. And that becomes, it's almost like looking at a tree. If you're in a tree planting exercise and you plant a tree, you expect that the tree should have its roots. The roots should go as deep as possible. Then you want the trunk or the stem, to really grow and get, its, firmness in the ground. And then you have branches and then fruits and things like that. So I see active income where there's an income source that is being generated in any of the asset classes that people are interested in, as an important source of even generating money that can then flow into passive income streams. One of the other things that I think about, I often talk about triangles or three things in 3 dimensions. People who know me know that I look at things in 3 dimensions or 3 angles, and I have this series that I run called the Triangles of Impact. And so if you think about a triangle almost like a pyramid, and you look at income generation sources, more often than not, the people who are at the base, and extremely important, would be people who are employees. Extremely important in the marketplace. And then, of course, on top of the employers, you have the employer. You have next, going on that pyramid or upward towards the apex of the triangle, then you would have the next level, which would be the employers or the business owners, or self-employed, so to say. And that usually dovetails with entrepreneurs, because when you're an entrepreneur, you get to a point where you establish a business and you would have employees who collaborate to make that business a success. And then at the peak or at the apex, again, this is, my visualization of that concept would be where you now have investors. So, and you find people, who pretty much are involved in every aspect of that pyramid. So I'm a physician, I have a medicine professional corporation, my wife has a medicine professional corporation, but I own a number of other corporations. So I'm definitely at that base where, I own businesses, but at the same time too, I'm an employee of myself. So I pay myself a salary, and I then, depending on what my needs are, I may decide to also pay myself a dividend. The difference there is that I'm not a traditional employee, because I dictate how much I'm going to pay myself based on the income that I've generated, and I have autonomy and control. But beyond that, I see myself as an entrepreneur because I'm involved in a number of other businesses and interests, and then ultimately my greatest passion at this stage is looking for areas where I can invest passively, so that there is passive income that is generated that goes beyond what I need, because that's the other thing that most people think about. You get to the point where you're thinking, okay, my needs are met, but how can I have enough that will go beyond what I need and get to that point where you can now make a difference or a lasting impact in the lives of people in your community and places around you. Is that principle, again, of 3, the blessings of the hand, what you have in your hand that is enough for you, the blessings of the basket, which is enough for your friends and your family and people around you, but the blessings of the storehouse is really the ultimate point that people should aspire to get to, where you have enough to send people to school, pay people school fees, feed a whole village, feed a whole community, make a difference in people's lives, set people up in business and take a bit of an equity stake in the business and then let them run with it.
No, I agree. I feel like with wealth building, sometimes, I think in the past, I used to be scared of saying that I want to be rich out loud, just because people frown on it or think it's for selfish reasons. But a lot of times people don't understand that you need to be in those spaces or be wealthy to then be able to give back to your community.
Absolutely.
The more you have, the more you can give back. For example, for me, I had been sponsoring 10 girls to school, and my ultimate goal is to hopefully build a school in Nigeria where it's free and people can be educated, basically, because I know opportunities are different, and I'm just fortunate that I had the opportunity to be educated and get to this position. And it's like, how can I transfer that back to people? And I need to build wealth and have money to be able to do that. So I need to invest and become financially independent, I would say.
I agree. Absolutely.
I think
that is tied in with purpose, and that's ultimately what gives people joy and fulfillment. Again, that's not to say that people who are at the employee level are not making a difference. They're making a difference at that level, but it's important for people to aspire to own a business, become an entrepreneur, and then become an investor, so that you can do so much more than just look after the people that are in your immediate circle of contact and influence.
I love that framing, like the impact side of wealth, because a lot of times we just talk about wealth to then buy material things, or that's how people think about it. But I love the impact side of wealth. I know you have this popular framework of the different asset classes, so I'd love you to go over maybe like the top 4 frameworks, because we always speak about like wealth in terms of money or just real estate. So what other asset classes are there? Quick one, this podcast is about wealth on your terms, and for a lot of people that includes real estate. I'm a licensed realtor in Ontario, and I help people think strategically about how real estate fits into their overall wealth plan, whether that be buying, investing, selling, renting, or just making smarter decisions. I'm going to be there to guide you through the numbers, ensure you understand the trade-offs and opportunity costs, so you can make informed decisions with confidence. So if you're interested in real estate, check the link in the description box or show notes. And while we're at it, if you're finding value from this podcast, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, don't forget to hit the follow button and give us a 5-star review. It really goes a long way, and it ensures that we're able to put out more episodes for you, and I really appreciate it. Let's get back into the video.
Okay. Yeah, that's one that I'm always very passionate about talking about. And so it's a concept that I have developed over time. It might be slightly different from what people are used to. But I have this framework with 9 asset classes, and the asset classes are divided into 3 segments. So each category has 3 asset groups. Okay. And because I'm so passionate about real estate investing, and I've been investing in real estate for over 20 years, the way I was able to conceptualize this was to look at a building and look at the 3 most important components of a building. So every building will have a foundation. So you'd have that solid foundation that needs to be in place, and then on top of the foundation, generally you would have the walls and the contents of the building, and then at the top of the building you usually have a ceiling and the roof. So I kind of divided those asset classes into foundational asset classes, contents, walls and content asset classes, and then the ceiling and the roof asset classes. And they're simultaneous and they're also sequential, which means, people can decide to fabricate the walls or fabricate part of the ceiling or the building while they're still working on the foundation. So it doesn't follow the traditional building protocol where people have to then do the foundation first and all that. So I'll start with what I describe as the foundational asset classes, and I'll list them. We may not have the time to go into them in detail, but for me, the foundational asset classes are what I described as, number 1, the human asset class, number 2, the insurance or protection asset class, and then number 3, the real estate asset class. So the human asset class is you and I. In fact, that is the most valuable asset on the face of earth. We can't replace human life. The human resource, the deployment of our spirit, our mind, and our body on a daily basis to develop relationships, to foster our skills in occupation, to make a difference in our finances and our environment is the human asset class. And that's the most important part to nurture. Because we all agree there will be no pursuit of financial wealth or wealth in any of the other domains if we're not healthy. Yeah. And that's where, one of my passions and my wife's passion as we're both physicians comes from, because we're so passionate about looking after the spirit, the mind, and the body, because we realize that's the most important human asset class. So when people say, where should you invest first? I'll say, invest in yourself. Okay. You never go wrong when you invest in yourself. Spiritually, mentally, and physically, you will never go wrong. And then on top of that, you then invest in relationships, in your occupation or your core skill or cluster of skills, and then also invest in your finances. So that's another framework in itself, looking at the 7 different domains of health and wealth, but that's under the human asset class. In fact, I actually, again, because I'm so passionate about real estate, I actually call it the human real estate. My spirit, mind, and body is my human real estate, and I have to nurture it and I have to look after it, because God has only given me one life, and I have to use that life to the best of my ability to serve people, to help people, and to make a difference in the world. So that's the human asset class. Now, the second asset class is what I call the insurance or protection asset class. And we all know, what insurance is about. You take out insurance, you pay a premium, and the insurance company guarantees that if you do have any problems, they would step in to cushion the impact of that problem or to solve the problem. So what I did, and again, this is just a rough, description, is to look at insurance again with a triangle. So at the apex of the triangle is what I call spiritual insurance, which in my opinion is the ultimate insurance that everybody needs to do enough research to be confident about that they have. There are, of course, undoubtedly many faiths in the world. For the last 35 years, since 1st of April 1990, I have passionately given myself to faith in Christ, given the work that he did 2,000 years ago to redeem man to God, as it were. And I describe that as the ultimate spiritual insurance because the premiums were paid 2,000 years ago. And as a beneficiary, I was given the contract when I accepted him as my Lord and Savior. And he was like, I paid the premiums. Now you have a free contract, which means you have insurance, not just in this life, but when you translate to the life after.
Yeah.
So that's at the apex of insurance. That's spiritual insurance. Now, the left-hand base of that triangle, which is really important that people put in place, is what I call the personal and professional liability insurance. And that's where you have things like disability insurance, critical illness insurance, life insurance.
Yeah.
Now, life insurance, we honestly, Tobi, we could spend the next 1 hour talking about life insurance because I am extremely passionate about it. Mm-hmm. Term life insurance, universal life insurance, standard whole life insurance, or dividend paying, participating whole life insurance, which I believe is the crown jewel of life insurance. Mm-hmm. Again, time may not permit us to go into the details of what that entails because it's a powerful investment tool, a powerful generational wealth building tool, and most importantly, a powerful generational transfer of wealth tool.
Okay.
So that's under personal and professional insurance. And then, of course, the one that almost everybody is familiar with on the right-hand base angle of insurance is property and possession insurance. So my car is insured, your car is insured, your home is insured. So that doesn't really require that much explanation because some of it is actually mandated and people have to have it. So that's the insurance asset class, which is extremely important. And most wealth builders will tell you that when they started building wealth, they got to a point where a good advisor or a good mentor, a good coach really asked them that critical question about how much protection and preservation do you have in place for your wealth? What kind of plans have you put in place to transfer your wealth? It doesn't matter what level. It could be just building wealth. You could just have an active income source. You could be at the base of the pyramid and be an employee. You still have to have these three forms of insurance in place because especially when you now have dependents, it becomes critical for you to think about disability insurance, critical illness insurance, life insurance, because that's securing the wealth that you've built. And people will be like, what wealth do I have at that point? I'm just starting in life and all that. And I'll say, look at yourself in the mirror and look at how many years have been invested to make you an adult. And now maybe you have a child or two. This is wealth and you have to protect it. So that's insurance. Then the third foundational asset class is what I call geographical real estate. So when people talk about real estate, everybody's mind just goes to buildings, land, and water. But I call it geographical real estate because in my discussions of real estate and my passion of real estate, I divided real estate into three. The human real estate, which I've talked about, geographical real estate, which is passion for water, land, and buildings. And then I have something else, which we probably won't get into now, called heavenly real estate. But we'll leave that for a minute. So let's just look at geographical real estate because that's a foundational asset class, in my opinion. Starting with the fact that shelter is an extremely important need for humankind. In fact, if you were looking at the hierarchy, food and water, and then shelter will be second. Hierarchy of human needs. So the fact that there's that need means that there's an important value add system tied towards real estate investing. It means that there are problems that need to be solved in that area. And my wife and I, well over 20 something years ago now, accidentally got into real estate investing.
We'll dive into that if you're watching.
Exactly. We'll really get into that later. And so I always encourage people that is a foundational asset class. And people are always like, real estate investing and all that. And I'm also like, even just buying your family home, in my opinion, my humble opinion, is an asset. And there will be books that you would have read where there will be arguments about your home is not an asset. And I have very good reasons to point out to people that your family home, depending on where you buy it, but in a country like Canada, your family home is an asset. First and foremost, is adding value to your family. It's providing shelter to you and your family. Second, it's one of the 7 buckets in Canada where if you accrue passive equity in it, and you sell it, you walk away tax-free. There are 7 buckets, 7 key buckets in Canada, where 2 of which I would never really advise people to dabble into. But those 2 are gambling and the lottery. So if you win money when you're a non-professional gambler, you don't pay tax on it. And of course, if you win the lottery in Canada, you don't pay tax on it. But your primary residence is the first asset where if you hold it long enough and you build enough equity in it and you pay down the mortgage, because paying down your mortgage on a primary residence is also a way of discipline, like getting people to pay down the mortgage, to actually use that money that they would have used buying consumer products to invest in their home. Plus, if the equity accrues over time and the property appreciates in value, and you get to an age where you feel you don't need a home that is that big anymore, maybe you have a bit of an empty nest, and you downsize and sell that property, you walk away with the income that has accrued in that property, the equity that has accrued in that property tax-free. So from that point of view, again, opinions would differ.
I have a different opinion.
Yes, but I've been in real estate long enough to also highlight that you could also add a HELOC to that property, and you access the equity, and you pull the equity out and use it to buy 3 or 4 more properties.
I think the problem there is that it only works for people who are financially disciplined and financially literate, because some people just buy houses thinking, people online said buying a house is an investment, and then they end up house poor. Especially in our community, you probably have heard of situations like that. So I feel maybe people just don't understand the numbers enough to make good decisions. And that's where that situation comes in.
True.
Because I have a different opinion.
Very true.
And like a general blanket opinion.
Yes. And I understand why even most prolific real estate investors like Robert Kiyosaki and a whole lot of other investors out there would say it's not an asset. And I have taken a position that it is, because financial literacy is extremely important. When you realize what an asset should be, and even when you're buying your home, you buy it with that mindset, you would think differently when you're acquiring it. But even the steps to buying your family home is education. It's discipline, because you have to save for the down payment. So it's getting you, if you're thinking with an investor's mindset, is getting you to the point where you are now learning certain things, that you've bought this first home, you're living in it, you're getting value out of it. That whole experience and education that you get from it can now be something that you can leverage and make you feel more comfortable to buy an investment home. Or maybe you've bought your family home, you've ticked that box, the house is too big, it's too expensive, but there's equity in it, you sell it, and then you downsize to a small duplex or a triplex. But you will take all the equity in that property tax-free. Because remember, if you sell an investment property, you don't walk away tax-free. It's capital gains. You take that money tax-free, and then you can now downsize and buy maybe 2 or 3 duplexes or 4plexes or 5plexes. So for me, it is still a place where, for that discipline, because people will make an effort to buy that home. But it's right, and we'll probably come to this later, that people shouldn't bite more than they can chew. I think where the problem comes with being house poor is biting way more than they can chew. So their mortgage consumes them. It's the expense that is way beyond what they should have even gotten into. So in that sense, and that could happen even with real estate investing, because if we leave the family home and we just look at general proper real estate investing, and someone asks me, what are the golden principles in real estate investing? And I know we may have come to this later. Is I would say the very first thing is fundamental principles. You need education. You need the kind of mindset for real estate investing. And you need to realize that it is not a get-rich-quick scheme,
Yes.
then you need to understand the fundamentals, that it's really down to a few principles. First and foremost is the numbers. It's not emotion. Then the second is obviously 3 key principles: the location of the asset you want to buy, the price point at which you're buying it, and then obviously the timing.
Yeah.
Are you buying at the peak of the market, or are you buying when the market is just picking up?
Yeah.
So there are important principles, even in the real estate world of investing, there's fully investing, that people need to understand for them to really enjoy, again, providing value to tenant clients, but also making a difference in people's lives. And then, in fact, even just understanding real estate investing. Land development is different from private lending
Yes.
or mortgages, and is also different from owning income property. So you really need to know which ones are you interested in.
That's true.
But I know that's a bit more advanced, so we won't go into that right now. But to go back to your initial question,
Yes.
real estate investing in general, I don't think there are any millionaires or billionaires or people who've done very, very well over many generations who have not invested in real estate, whether it is land, water, or buildings.
Yep.
So that's the foundational asset class. Now, the next asset class, which I will just touch upon briefly, has again 3 asset groups, in my opinion. The first asset group is active and or passive businesses.
Okay.
And we talked about that earlier. So that in itself is an asset, because it can be an income generation, value adding, problem solving machine. Active and or passive businesses. Then the next in that group is what I call the public or virtual markets. So the stock market.
Okay.
Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, crypto, currency, and the whole bag or basket of assets that are in that domain, which is often talked about. Yes, does have quite a bit of volatility around it, but there is good money to be made there.
Yes.
And is also tied to the fact that many companies that are quoted on the stock market that have done very well are companies that are making a difference in people's lives and adding value.
That's true.
So you're not just investing in the air, you're actually investing in a business that is doing well. So that's that group. Then the third group in that area, which is, we're talking about the walls, what I call the walls and contents now, is commodities of value. So people don't talk about that generally. You can be invested in it either on the stock market or privately, where you're looking at, oil and gas, you're looking at gold, silver, platinum, but all those, commodities that have been around for such a long time, that hold value, that, you can use as a hedge against inflation. That's also a good place to invest some time, some money, and some talent to really be able to understand how it works. Okay. So that's rules. That is the walls and the content.
Walls, yeah.
Now the ceiling, and that's already 6 groups.
Yep.
If you looked at how it's dividing them, and then the last group has to do with intellectual property. So it's another group which I call the ceiling and the roof, and the first in that group is intellectual property.
People don't think of that as assets. That's true, yeah.
This podcast is an intellectual property.
Yeah.
Because in 100 years from now, somebody's going to watch this podcast that you put together, and it's going to pick up 1 or 2 nuggets from it, and it's going to run with it and make a difference in people's lives, and make a lot of income and build wealth.
Yeah.
Books, courses, apps. There are people who've designed apps.
Yeah.
And they're sitting in the basement of their house and they're hearing cha-ching, 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 because people are paid $5 or $6 a month just to use the app.
Yeah.
So intellectual property is massive, and it has many different subsets and areas. But that's another asset class that is definitely always worth developing as part of wealth building. And then the next from that is what I call the triple S. Again, this is something that I came up with. So the triple S stands for systems, strategies, and structures. Extremely important in wealth building.
Okay.
And that starts from your estate planning, having a primary will, having a secondary will, having a power of attorney for property, a power of attorney for healthcare, and everybody needs that, because even if people are like, oh, I don't really have anything, what will happen, if I die? But you have dependents, you have family members, you have people who, would be in a distressed situation if you don't have those things in place. Or, God forbid, if a person falls ill and decisions need to be taken on their behalf, that's also where things like power of attorney for property or power of attorney for healthcare comes in, because somebody else now has the authority to step in legally to make those decisions for them. And then a whole lot of other systems and structures that can be put in place, corporate structures, business structures, making sure you have 1 to 3 lawyers that you can reach out to if you need them, 1 to 3 accountants that you can reach out to, 1 to 3 physicians that you can reach out to. So just having that kind of power team around yourself is part of that system, structure, and strategies. And I see that as a massive asset class because over time, I've fine-tuned it. I'm still developing it. I'm beginning to realize, this is what, even right down to things like bookkeeping. Like simple bookkeeping, whether you're doing it yourself or whether you're outsourcing it. The more efficient you are doing it, the more efficient you are at automating things, the more efficient you are at delegating things, the more comfortable you become with multitasking and taking a lot more on.
That's true.
And that's that in itself, for me, I believe is an asset class that people develop over time, and you have to keep fine-tuning it. And that's why I call it the triple S: your systems, your structures, and your strategies. And the last is, something I just threw in there to make the ceiling and the roof complete. And I basically call it the streams of income. That after all is said and done, what we should all aspire to do in the financial wealth building process is to develop multiple streams of income. And those incomes could come from the human asset class, the intellectual property, real estate, insurance, public markets, commodities of value, active businesses. So if you look at all the asset classes I've mentioned, each of them have an income generation process.
That's actually
so that when you get to passive income time, which is retirement as it were, you have a few taps that you can switch on. I mean, you may have switched some of them on way before then, and then it starts generating income that will be enough not just for the rest of your lifetime, but will also be enough for the generations after you, and that is possible for sure.
No, that's so good.
I know I've
no, but I like the framework because a lot of times we don't think as certain things as assets. We don't realize. We hear a lot about real estate, but some people, for example, might have a podcast and not realize that this is an asset they're building, but you're so focused on investing in real estate. I know a lot of millionaires built their wealth or billionaires built their wealth via real estate, but you might as well start with even the small thing you have and work your way up to then maybe even buy an investment property.
True. And if you think about it in this day and age, at least since the late 90s, early 2000s, and more so even now, content creation on social media, especially when it's significant value adding, problem solving, difference making content that is put out there, becomes a really powerful income generating asset.
Yeah, I agree. Talking about real estate, so I'd like to know how you started in real estate, because I know most of your portfolio is in Canada, but you also have something in the UK. How did you start? How did you fall into real estate?
Yeah, so it's so like I said earlier, I think it was my wife and I got into real estate investing shortly after we got married. And, I often say it was by accident, even though looking back now, obviously I had been, involved in it back home in Nigeria. So just a little bit about my background. So I'm originally West African, originally from Nigeria, grew up in Nigeria. So my formative years were in Nigeria. I actually went to medical school in Nigeria. I'm always very proud of that. Nigeria gave me, a solid educational base, gave me the resilience that had helped me through life for sure. And then I moved to the UK. But even when we were in Nigeria, my parents were involved in building properties and involved in real estate. So I was always actively involved and observing all that. And I worked really quite close with them. And they had a number of real estate interests. So I already had an interest there, and I saw the power, particularly the power of passive appreciation. So real estate has 4 cash profit centers.
Can you explain the 4?
Yes. So I'll come back again to my background and how we got into real estate, but just to kind of veer off. So in real estate, I usually say there are 10 in total. There are 10 profit and impact centers. And out of those 10, there are 4 that I call the cash or profit centers. So I'll go through the 10 and then I'll narrow in on the 4 when I get there. So the first 2 for me, and again, this is a concept that I came up with. The very first, right at the top, is that you're making impact in the lives of what I call my tenant clients. So you're providing shelter to people. I was a tenant when I first bought my home, and then before I bought my home. So I know the value of making sure that you're providing value to your tenants. So providing impact in the lives of your tenants is really, for me, number one, impact center in real estate investing. Then number two is, the more real estate you invest in, you're also gradually moving closer and closer and closer to achieving financial independence, financial empowerment, financial freedom, which my general definition of that is getting closer to the point where you can choose to spend your time, your talent, and your treasure as you see fit.
Yes.
So that's the second impact center. So if you think about it, the first two are impact centers in real estate investing. Then the next four are core cash profit centers. And those core cash profit centers are passive appreciation. In other words, the value of a building that goes up regardless of what you actively do to it. Just economic laws of demand and supply cause the value to go up over time. So that's called passive appreciation.
Yeah.
Active appreciation, this is usually when you actually do something to the building to increase its value. So maybe an underperforming building, or an undervalued building, or a building that needs a bit of renovation, you do some substantial or minimal renovation to it, and then that adds value to it. So that's active appreciation. Or if you're looking at the multi-family residential group, like apartment buildings, by just optimizing the net operating income from the building and keeping the expenses as lean and mean, you can also increase the value of the building, because basically what you're doing is you're increasing the income generating potential of the building by doing that.
Right.
So that's an active way of increasing the value of a building also. And then the third profit center in real estate investing is what we call principal recapture or mortgage pay down. So for all the properties, especially apartment buildings that I own or have invested in, the tenants, who are my tenant clients that I value very much, are paying down the mortgage on a monthly basis. And with every mortgage pay down, there is equity that is accruing to me. So that's a profit center in itself. And then the fourth profit center is what we call cash flow, which is what people are more conversant with, which is what's left on the table after all expenses are paid and after a bit of it is put in the operational reserve pot. And those are the profit centers. Then, so that's already 2 plus 4, that's 6. The last 4 are what I call the tax benefit income centers. So you can see why people are very passionate about real estate.
Yes.
Because when people are like, oh, how many profit centers do you have in real estate? I'm like, they're not just 4, they're actually 10.
Yeah.
Because the last 4, we include things like the fact that if you buy real estate and you buy it correctly, the expenses become tax deductible.
Yes.
So tax deductible expenses, interest deductible expense, and then you can refinance the property. So I call it the harvest.
Yeah.
You go in every 3 years or every 5 years, the property has gone up in value. You check the numbers, you make sure the fundamentals are solid, you approach the lender, and then you pull some equity out of the property. You don't pay tax on that equity. As long as the rents that have gone up over that 5-year period are still able to cover the new debt service, you take that equity out and you can buy another piece of real estate or invest more passively in a piece of real estate. So that ability to refinance, my wife and I, that's in fact, I'll come back to the story, that was the eye-opener for us. In the very first property we bought in the UK, we're like, wow, really? You mean we can pull money out of this property to buy more properties? And we did that a number of times, and that really set us on our journey for real estate investing. The last profit center, which again is not talked about often, but I call it the accountant's abracadabra, which is depreciation.
Oh, yeah.
The ability to be able to depreciate a property, which almost becomes like an expense, that accountants, I'm not an accountant.
People don't know a lot about that.
Yes.
And the benefits of,
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
So, but when you buy real estate, especially when you start buying multifamily real estate in buildings or commercial real estate buildings, when it comes to the annual accounting, there are depreciation formulas that a good accountant would normally be able to apply that would save you in paying taxes, essentially. And this is very popular in North America, and an area that people take a massive advantage of when somebody has bought this property, is generating so much income, and then for the last 10, 15 years, they're not even paying any tax.
Yes.
Yet there's money that is actually making. It's not that it's not making money, but they have all these tax advantages that help them to pull money out. Like this release of equity.
Yeah.
You could have so much equity in a property and you just go there every 5 years and you harvest the equity and you're not paying any tax on it, whereas you're using that equity to grow wealth. So for me, that is just incredibly powerful. And so the very first property we bought in the UK, we were fortunate, and that's why I say it's by accident, that it had 3 keys.
What are 3 keys?
3 keys, which I mentioned earlier, are we bought it in a fantastic location. We still own it 20-something years down the road.
Yeah.
We bought it in a fantastic location. We bought it at the right time. So we didn't buy it at the peak of the market. And we got it at a bargain price. So such that within a few years after that, or maybe several years after that, we were able to refinance that property, refinanced it once. The money that was pulled out, we used to buy another property. We refinanced again. The money that was used after that, we used to buy another property. And then we refinanced it again. And the money that was pulled out, we used to buy another property. So my wife and I always call it the goose that keeps laying the golden egg. And the last refinance that we did was in 2019, just before the pandemic, which is like, 8 to 9 years after we had even left the UK.
Yeah.
We just went back and said, let's see how much. Let's see if that goose has some equity in it again that we can harvest. And we refinanced again in 2019. In fact, then we now refinanced a few UK properties, and we brought a substantial amount of liquidity or cash here to Canada and invested it.
Curious, like comparing real estate, your properties in the UK versus in Canada, what markets would you say does better?
So just in a general sense, I would say North America does better.
Okay.
In general, the UK can be a bit more conservative. They don't have the land.
Sure.
Their properties have a more of a conservative approach to their real estate market.
Okay.
So for you to really do well in real estate in the UK, location is a big deal.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, that would be my general description of it. And we were fortunate to have bought in London, in a prime area in London.
Yeah.
So that's how we got into real estate. And of course, it set alarm bells off in our heads. So even when we moved to Canada, by the way, we then moved to Canada 14 years ago. So I actually did my residency training, my general residency training in the UK, practiced in the UK for a while.
Okay.
And then 14 years ago, we both decided, my wife too did her residency in the UK, and then we decided to move here.
Why? Why Canada?
So I think, first and foremost, my wife wanted to do some advanced training.
Okay.
So apart from her general, she's a radiologist, she's a diagnostic radiologist.
Okay.
So apart from her general training, she wanted to do some additional training and didn't want to do it in the UK. She could have done it in the UK. These are usually what are called fellowships, which means you subspecialize.
Yeah.
And so the options were, where do we do it? Of course, we want to go to a Commonwealth or English-speaking country. So it was Australia, New Zealand, the UK, the US, Canada. And we did have some friends who had moved to Canada. Okay. And the UK has a bit of a reciprocal arrangement with Canada on many levels, just given the history that they share.
Yeah.
So she applied for fellowships here. And, I was like, okay, I have 2 options. Either wait for you to go, because it's a 1-year fellowship. You do the fellowship and you come back. Or maybe I should see what I can do in Canada. And so I then looked around and I had 2 options, either to just look for a job as a specialist physician here, which I was eligible to do, or whether I should take some time to maybe do a fellowship and then subspecialize in my area of interest. And I did. And, so I got a fellowship, a 1-year fellowship, came in. So I was doing my fellowship, she was doing her fellowship. And then after the fellowship, we're like, oh, it feels good here, big roads, big cars,
big houses, bigger houses compared to the UK.
Exactly. Let's just say more space, because I don't want people to think I'm about just big houses and big cars.
No, but that's how we say. Like when I go to the States, I'm like, wow, the houses are bigger. So absolutely. Comparing.
We don't have basements, in the UK. So anyway, we saw that, and again, because when I see real estate, it catches my attention. Like even just coming here today, I saw the multiple apartment buildings around here, and I was like, are these owned by REITs, or are they owned by corporations, or are they owned by individuals? So when you're passionate about something, you see it all the time. So coming to Canada really caught our fancy, and we decided to stay. So we just wrote the board exams, and we've been here now for 14 years. Have invested quite a bit in real estate, because when we got here, we then double down in acquiring more knowledge, understanding the way the market works, the North American climate, so to say, in real estate investing, and then really kind of picked a bit of a niche area. So we, did a few things in various domains.
What's your niche?
We did private lending, we did land development, but we really then focused on multi-family apartment buildings.
Okay.
So it's important for people who are thinking about real estate to ultimately aim to focus on 1 to 3 areas of real estate investing.
Yeah.
And I usually use 1 to 3 because you can go either into the service area of real estate investing where you become a realtor, a property manager, or skilled trades where you're servicing real estate, or you can be someone who actually invests in the product itself. So we focused on multifamily apartment buildings. We still do a little bit in the other areas too, which is more passive.
Like private lending?
Yes, like private lending.
I have a horror story. One of my friends went through a horror story with
so
private lending.
Again, I can talk for an hour. I can definitely talk for an hour on private lending. So again, just because you've brought it up.
If anyone is interested, podcast-wise, leave comments on other things. Because you're a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, so private lending, I would say the key principles, I always have like 3 principles. Is if you're going to do private lending, do not do unsecured private lending, which means do not do promissory notes. Do not lend people money that you cannot afford to lose. If you're going to lend anyone money, do what the banks do. It should be bank grade, which means the money should be secured against the hard asset. And it should be secured in first position. People are like, oh, but the banks have to take first position. I'm like, well, then don't do it. If you don't have enough money to be in the first position, then don't do it. Because if you're in the second position, some people do second position mortgage, but for you to be in the second position mortgage and be safe, there are a few key principles. Number 1 is you need to make sure that there's substantial equity in the property such that if there's a default and the first position invokes their power to foreclose and the property is sold, that they will get all their money back and that there'll be enough still in the deal or in the property to pay the second position. And that's kind of risky because once the first person gets paid, it's the crumbs that are left on the table that goes to the second person. So private lending for me has to be bank grade. So if you either come together as a group and then you be the first lender, basically be the bank, or don't do it at all. So I know I just had to kind of veer off there because again, there are people who watch this and I think private lending is exciting. I'm like, don't do it if it's not secure and don't do it if you can't secure in the first position. Because you see a lot of situations where people are doing what they call BRRRRs, where they buy, renovate, rent and refinance, and then they come to people and they want to borrow $50,000 or they want to borrow $100,000 and you say, what do you want to do it? And they want to renovate and they say they're going to secure it against this property, but they strip the property down. And they're not going to secure the property in the first position. It's going to be in the second position or not even secured at all. And if everything goes down the drain, that money will be lost. So that's not private lending. You're basically just taking a risk and it's too much of a risk for people to take. So private lending, like I said, I can talk about that for an hour because, I've seen the good, the bad and the ugly. Again, that's the good thing about doing real estate for a long time. I've had the good, the bad and the ugly. Fortunately, more good, but certainly bad and the ugly. And that always informs, some of the advice.
Let's dive into the bad. What are perhaps mistakes you've made or property types where your personal opinion, if I'm coming to you, maybe I'm saying, okay, I'm a new real estate investor or I want to invest in real estate. What are property types or things you've seen that you just tell me to stay clear of? Just like how you've explained private lending now.
Yes. And so I'll start by saying there's no hard and fast rule, but there are general guidelines. And these guidelines, part of which are based on my experience of doing this for many years, and why I have definitely decided to focus in certain areas. So the few principles, just to kind of give some structure to it, looking at the various types of real estate investing that people are involved in. So if we start with private lending, so remember, real estate is first divided into 3 broad categories. Lending in general, so mortgages or private lending, that's all lending. And lending is a massive area. And then you have land development, where people are buying land and building from scratch. And then, of course, you have income property, where you actually buy a property because you want to earn an income from it while you're providing value to your tenants. So if we look at the private lending, I know I had talked about that briefly, so I won't really emphasize so much on it, that it needs to be secure. And it needs to be secure in the first position. If you cannot do that, then don't lend. Or if you cannot afford to lose the money, maybe if you have 50,000 and somebody you really, really trust and you can afford to lose the money, then maybe you can lend in an unsecured position, but I wouldn't advise it. So that's the general principle. Just do what the banks do.
Okay.
That's the general advice on the private lending side. Now, I have actually got my fingers burnt. I want to be very authentic on a podcast like this to say, how did I come to make this conclusion?
Yeah.
It's because, yes, I've had very good experiences where I have done secure and I've done some unsecure, and I was doing some of the unsecure private lending, and it was great because the returns were very good.
Yes.
It's always very high returns. High returns.
When this person told me about returns, I'm like, wow.
High returns equals to high risk, right?
Yeah.
And then I got my fingers burnt and I was like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it anymore, right? One of the things, principles that business owners, entrepreneurs, investors learn is I coined this phrase called GIC. I said, let GIC always guide you. G stands for greed. I stands for impulsivity. And C stands for compromise. Most of the times when I have got my fingers burnt or got myself into hot water has because either it was greed that was driving me, the returns were like, wow.
Shiny, yeah.
Impulsivity was either I didn't spend some time to do enough due diligence, let it sit and simmer for a while.
Yeah.
The train isn't going anywhere. If one train goes, another one will come.
Yes.
The fear of missing out should never be something that drives you to make an impulsive decision. Check with your mentors. Give it some time. Walk through the numbers. Take the emotion out of it. And then it causes impulse to really, really then find its level. And you're like, okay, no, I can't do this. Or if somebody puts your gun at your head and say, this deal is about to go now. If you don't invest now, I'm like, yeah, let it go.
Yes.
Another boss is going to come.
Yeah.
And then the C stands for compromise. It's important, not just in real estate investing, but as an entrepreneur and investor, that you have certain core values, certain core business values, certain core values in the way you interact with people. Who are you going to do business with? What kind of business partners are you looking for? What kind of people do you want in your team? What are the things that you will and will not do? And don't compromise on them. Because more often than not, when people get into trouble, if they really, really reach down deep into themselves, like I have done sometimes, it's because I compromised on one or two values that I thought I had screwed down and said I wouldn't compromise on. So that's GIC.
I love that.
So that's a guide. And for me, I'm hoping that would always guide me going forward. Because, even if someone wants to offer you 20% return, you should sit back, or 15% return. You should be like, for them to offer you that, then they should be making another 10 on top of it. Is that deal really worth this? How are they making it? And then you dig down in, and the minute you see a red flag, you just back off. So that's that's a general.
I love that because it can be applied to any form of investment.
Yes, any form, even business. Are you rushing into this because of the returns, or how soon or it's because Ponzi schemes, like you're going to get rich quickly. Whereas real estate is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Yes. Right? So if somebody is telling you something, you're just like, I can double this money, I can triple this money in 1 week, in 2 weeks. It's tough. Yeah. So that's in terms of private lending. Land development, again, we can't talk about land development properly because it's first and foremost for me in land development, you need to have experience, you need to have mentorship, you need to have coaching because there are many moving parts that you have zero control over, especially in North America. First with the city and the zoning and the bylaws to the land acquisition and having to deal with lenders who want to make sure that you've acquired the land and you have enough equity in there, to getting construction finance, to having a lot of soft costs. People don't realize the amount of soft costs that you have to pay planners, you have to pay architects, you have to pay surveyors, you have to pay engineers to do a long list of reports. So when you see a building emerge from the ground, you don't realize that there has been 5 years of work or 3 years of work that has been on the ground to even get that building to the point where they get issued a building permit. Yes. Right now, I'm currently working on a land development deal where we have the construction financing, we have CMHC insurance on top of it. Yeah. We have all the money lined up for the deal. And you know what's holding us up? The city, the municipality. It's frustrating.
How long have they? Because it could go
over a year. Over a year. And when they finally found out that we got the construction finance and the CMHC approval, the CO, what they call the COI, the certificate of insurance, Then they started coming up with some other things that they should have told us about a year ago.
Wow.
Site plan control, print documents and reports and things like that. So we're now really at knife edge where we've kind of put it all out to everybody in the city, from the councillor right down to everybody, that this is not on, especially because it's a development where we're going to provide affordable housing and we're going to provide some accessible housing.
Yeah.
So you can see that there's stuff that you wouldn't have control over. So when it comes to land development, three takeaways from people is that for land development that has to, not just building your own private home, but land development that has to do with investing in real estate, you don't want to jump into it as a complete novice.
Yes.
You want to make sure that you have mentorship, you have guidance, you're working with people, or you've worked with people and you've watched them and you've learned from them, and then you start small. We should never despise the days of little beginnings. And I know we'll probably talk about this later, that, people are like, oh, I want to get there quickly. No, start small. Small comes with small mistakes. Big comes with big mistakes. Right. So starting small, especially in land development, is important. Being coached, being mentored is extremely important. And then for land development, remember there are three key things in land development. One is start small. Two is make sure you have coaching, mentorship, and guidance, hand-holding through it. And then the third is you must have deep pockets.
Because things will come up, right?
Yes. Liquidity is important. And one of the triangles I'll talk about before the end of this podcast that I talk about quite a bit is what I call, it applies to every area of life. It's a triangle, I call it the L triangle, which is liquidity, leverage, and liability. So if you look at all the angles there, liquidity, the power of liquidity, the power of leverage, and the power of liability. And hopefully we'll be able to talk about that briefly there. But that's for land development. And then obviously for income property, the general principles, just to put this out there again, this is my opinion based on my experience, is I stay away from certain things. I stay away from pre-construction condos.
I'm curious why.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
people.
So in 2006, 2007, 2008, the crisis, which I successfully lived through, the recession of 2006, 2007. My wife and I set out to buy 3 pre-construction condos in the UK.
Oh, okay.
And I'll just quickly rush through what happened so people know that's exactly what's happening to people in Toronto right now.
Right now, yes.
Right. And this happened to us almost 20 years ago, or almost 20 years ago, right? And basically got a developer, put down a deposit or a down payment. It all sounds so good when you're paying instrumentally. You want to buy these 3 condos in a building and you agree a price with the developer, you nail down the price, everything is all great, and then the developer says, I'll deliver in 2 to 3 years' time or more. Unfortunately for us, we signed all those contracts before the recession, and then the recession hit. And the minute the recession hit, which is where I said it's important to look at the cycles. When are you buying? When are you signing up? Because I know there are people who say, oh my God, I signed up at the right time for a pre-construction condo, and by the time it was completed, it was almost 2 times the value, and I sold and made money. But not many people walk away that well from it. Because when we signed up for it, we got to a point where the recession now hit. So our first prayer, which was never answered, was that the developer shouldn't complete the building and return our money back. That the developer should go into recession and return our money. And now that I'm way more experienced, I realized that prayer was not. It was even good that it was not answered, because if the developer had gone bankrupt, we wouldn't have got all the money we had even put in. The deposit would not have come back to us.
Yeah, that's true.
So asking that the developer should not finish because you knew that the final price, the final appraisal of those 3 condos were going to be less than what we had agreed.
Yes.
And the developer held us to the agreement 3 years earlier. So by the time the building was completed, it was now clear that the condos that we had agreed to buy for X were now X minus Y. So significantly less than that. So the problems, and that's why I talk about liquidity, you need to have money whenever you're dabbling into real estate.
Yes.
Again, people are like, oh, then nobody should get into real estate now, even if you have money. There are ways in which you can get into real estate without taking on so much risk. And I'll mention that later. But basically what happened with that for people who are always thinking about pre-construction condos was that the developer held our feet to the fire for the 3 condos and said, we must close on these 3 condos when the 3 condos have now dropped in value. Now, what made it worse was that the lenders who were going to lend us or provide leverage to us for the buildings now appraised the values and say, yeah, right, the value has dropped. It's not what you agreed with the guy 3 years earlier. And what we're going to do is we're only going to lend you 60% of this new reduced value. So do you understand?
Yeah.
So the lender is not even saying we're going to give you 80% of it. We're saying we're going to give you 60% of it. So we now needed to come up with the difference between the developer's agreed purchase price and the new reduced closing price, which is a loss in itself. And then we had to come up with 40% of this depreciated asset.
Let me just give an example for people. So for example, you signed with the developer. The developer said, oh, this is a 200K home. And then 3 years later, the lenders, the banks say, oh, this is actually 100K home because it has depreciated. And they're only going to give you, let's just say $60,000 to put down. So now you have to come up with the $140,000. That's what's happening with a lot of people in Toronto right now.
Yes. And what a lot of people are doing now is they're walking away from the deal, walking away from their deposit, and the developer is trying to sue them. Because the developer cannot even sell it to recoup their cost. So anyway, we were fortunate, to be honest, because again, this is where having an active source of income and a passive source of income comes in. So we obviously had liquidity, we had active sources of income, so we could bridge the gap. But even then, it was still high pressure because we needed to now engage the developer, and that's where negotiation really comes in. And we negotiated a lot of going back and forth, and the developer finally said, okay, you know what? I'll allow you to move your deposit from one of the condos. I'll let you off the hook from one of the condos, but I'll allow you to move your deposit from one of the condos into the other two. So as long as you can close on two, I'll let you off the hook for one. And that's what we did. And we still own those two condos. So
in London,
almost 20 years outside London, but in the UK.
London, UK, not London.
Yes, not London. So and we still own them. And it ended up being one of our more profitable investments. And people are going to be like, you said we should invest in condos. Like, we could literally have got our fingers completely burnt. Right. It ended up being more profitable because we put in so much money at the end of the day. And of course, 2008 was many, many years ago. That's almost 20 years ago. So over time, it's appreciated. But generally, I would say pre-construction condos are only good if you're going to live in them. They're not really an investment because it ties in with the other piece of investment that I would encourage people not to get involved in real estate is single family homes. Are for you and your family to live in. They're not really an investment. I mean, some people end up with it as a default. Like maybe you buy a small single family home and then you buy something bigger and then you keep what you had before, but that's by default. But if you're really setting out as a real estate investor, a single family home has its challenges. Some of the challenges would be the fact that it's a single unit. So you have one tenant. If that tenant stops paying rent, then that's zero income. If that tenant damages the property and you need to do some renovation for 2 months after the tenant has moved in, then you start paying the mortgage yourself and you have no income. So it's the vacancy rate on that building is 100% when you have a tenant move out. Whereas if you had a building that even had 2 units, 2 legal units, so 2 legal dwelling units, or 3, what we call it, in North America, we call that a duplex. If you have 3 legal dwelling units in a building, it's called a triplex. If you have 4 legal dwelling units, it's called a fourplex. And then if you have 5 dwelling units, that's called a fiveplex. And fiveplex and above, generally in North America, are what we call the commercial multifamily. So 2 to 4 units is small multifamily or residential multifamily, but 5 and above then becomes commercial multifamily. So really people want to I encourage people to start small, but if you're going to start with at least a duplex. At least it must have two dwelling units. Example, we have a duplex where the tenant above, believe it or not, has been the same tenant there for the last 7 years.
Wow.
Again, people will say, oh, well, but you've not really been able to increase your rent. No, but we've been increasing the rent by the provincial rate every year, and the tenant has been fantastic. Tenant has never missed a rent.
No headache.
Looks after the property. But the unit below, with the turnover we've had there, has been so rapid, so much that you've had people coming and going, some good, some bad. So if it was a single family home, and we had the profile of the person downstairs, the people downstairs, then that really would have been a very unprofitable business. But for the most part, when the tenant downstairs moves out, income is still coming from the tenant upstairs. So I always say, at the very least, if you're going to start small, start with a duplex. Or you could even do house hacking. If you're a young couple, a young person, you live in one unit, you rent out the other unit, but you're getting the benefit of a home for yourself and income from the tenant that is, money generating income from the other property. So those would be the things I would look at, from private lending, land development, and income property. And with income property, just to realize that it's really a game of numbers, it's a game of fundamentals, not an emotional purchase. You look at the location. What are all the amenities? What's the history? What's the future of the location? You look at those fundamentals. You ask yourself, where are we in the cycle?
Yes.
We know that about 2 years ago, in fact, let's go back to 2020. 2020, we basically hit a peak.
The peak of the
peak, right? The interest rates were so low, people were buying, they were bidding wars, and everything went to the peak.
Yeah.
And we thought we were going to stay, even I thought we were going to stay at the peak for a few years.
Yes.
Right? But then the pandemic left. And then there was inflation. And then interest rates went through the roof. And then we started crashing. And it cut a lot of people out.
Yes.
Literally, on many different levels. Either because people were over-leveraged, which is part of my talk about leverage. Either because they were over-leveraged, or they had bitten too much that they could chew, or they were involved in some land development projects. So real estate can be powerful, but it can also be a risky business. And the best ways to be able to shield that risk is make sure you have a lot of liquidity, not just equity, because you could have equity in a property and not have access to it.
It's different from, people confuse that, like liquidity is different from equity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So liquidity, like they say, cash flow is king and queen. So make sure you have a good source of income, or you have a place that you can access money easily if you need it.
Yeah.
Then, of course, equity is good to have equity, but remember that there are certain types of equity that you can access quickly, some you can't access quickly.
Yeah.
Like with a property, I've done so many refinances in my time, but anytime you want to do a refinance, and I always laugh about this because I'm a physician, and the bank will be like, we'd like to see your T1, your T2, your T4, your T5, they want to see all these CRA T forms to basically assess your income, stopping just short of saying we need a little bit of blood to check your financial DNA.
Yeah.
And then they will do a credit check and all that. Of course, if you pass all those hurdles with the lender, and don't get me wrong, I have relationships with over 10 banks. They're my business partners. I love banks because they take more risks than I do.
That's true.
But at the end of the day, they take you through that because you just want to pull out your equity.
Yeah.
What about if you really need that money urgently and you have to go through all that and you fail on one of those T4s, you don't have a good T4, you don't have a good T2 for 1 year, and they're like, no, you can't touch the equity in this property.
That's actually true. People don't realize that you might be in a situation where, because people just assume, oh, I buy real estate, I have equity, but you might be in a situation where that year things are just not good for you paper-wise, and then the bank actually doesn't allow you to.
And it's catching a lot of people out right now. Some people actually have properties where they're sitting on a lot of equity now and they can't refinance because the bank will look at you as a person. What's your income potential?
Yes.
We look at the property, what's the property's income potential? We look at the market and we look at the interest rate.
Yeah.
And we'll be like, no, we can't let you pull out any money here because when you pull out money from here, your debt service goes up.
Yes.
So they'll be like, no, you can't touch it. So you're looking at this property and you now have only one choice, which is to sell the property at a loss or sell the property and lose a lot of the equity. So it's important to have equity, but it's more important to have equity that you have easy access to, which is where I often encourage people that as soon as you are able to, maybe for a small multifamily or your primary residence, attach a HELOC to it. Attach a home equity line of credit. Even if you never use it, it's there.
Okay.
It's easy access. Or invest in things like a dividend-paying participating whole life insurance where you're putting money in this dividend-paying participating whole life insurance, and emphasize that because it's very different from what is out there as a standard whole life. This has to be a specific type of whole life insurance that is taken only with a mutual insurance company.
Okay.
And I know I'm kind of veering off on a segment there. The reason why I'm emphasizing this is places where you can have liquidity.
Okay.
Places where you can have, like with a HELOC, you would know that, okay, the HELOC is attached to the property. If you need some money, you can always access it.
Yeah.
or liquidity in the stock market. You can invest in the stock market. That's also a very liquid place to put your money, but it can be very volatile.
Yeah.
Or you could use this dividend paying participating whole life insurance, where you have money in there with a mutual insurance company as your cash value or equity that has grown over time. And if you need it, it's simply at the push of a button. And nobody's going to ask you any question.
Oh, okay.
And within 5 business days, that money is in your bank account.
Wow.
And it doesn't show on your credit report. So it's you're basically borrowing against your own equity from the insurance policy that pays you dividends every year from a mutual insurance company that you co-own.
Oh, okay.
So that's the difference. So we have in the insurance world, you have stock insurance companies and you have mutual insurance companies. A stock insurance company is one where stock shareholders own the company.
Okay.
Whereas a mutual insurance company is where it's the policy owners, like you and I, that own the company. So even when I take a loan against my equity in there and I pay interest on that loan, I'm basically paying the interest into a pool where I get to share in at the end of the year.
Oh, okay.
It's a very interesting concept. And that's what the Rockefellers,
what we know.
That's what the Rockefellers, the Walt Disneys, the Rogers, and even the banks, that's where they park their money. I don't know if
so that's not they don't share that with like the regular.
Yes. And the reason why, and again I have this bit that I do by the side which has to do with insurance, just teaching people about insurance, and I have 10 reasons why people will not want to do that, and we won't be able to get into that today.
I'll share your contact at the end, so people can paste on your page.
People can definitely reach me.
Yeah.
But once they understand those 10 reasons, they will know why they should do that, why they should invest in that kind of dividend paying participating whole life insurance if they can afford to. Because affordability is always something to consider. But I always tell people, start small. Everything starts small, right? Don't be put off, because that's still a better kind of insurance to take out for your because it has 3 benefits. It has living benefits that you can tap into, like this liquidity I'm talking about, while you're alive.
While you're alive, before even retirement.
Yes, it has retirement benefits, which means you can also tap into it and pull money out while you're retiring, where you don't have to even pay it back. And then it has death benefit, which would pay off when you finally, we call it graduation, when you graduate from Earth. And then if you have taught your beneficiaries well, they will take that tax-free money and they will reinvest it in the same dividend paying participating life insurance and just perpetuate the cycle. And that's what the Rockefellers and the big banks in Canada and in North America do.
Wow.
Remember I talked earlier that there are seven buckets or baskets in Canada, and I emphasize in Canada where you don't pay tax. Number 1, your family, your primary residence, so invest in that. Number 2, your tax-free savings account. I don't like the fact that they call it tax-free savings account. It should actually be called tax-free investment account. And then number 4 is life insurance, particularly this dividend-paying participating life insurance or universal life insurance. But the reason why that's a third box is that when you pass away, your beneficiaries will get a windfall. And that's how some families just pass. Imagine a family that has a windfall of 10 million tax-free. And they know what to do with
That's another thing, being strategic with actually passing. So we create wealth, we build wealth, but a lot of us don't know how to actually pass that to the future generation for them to actually enjoy it.
Absolutely. And again, it's also a function of what generation are we. So, for instance, in Canada now, I would describe myself, people may look at it differently, but I would say I'm generation 0. My children will be generation 1. Because they are the ones born here, right? So you look at things like that, but it doesn't really matter where you're coming from. You should always, true wealth goes beyond just making impact in people's lives, but it also, and that's where heavenly real estate comes in, it also thinks about posterity. It also thinks about impact even when you are gone. So some people will have that life insurance in place. When it pays out, maybe pays out 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, and they have in their will, please, 5 million of it should be given to this charity. It's zero tax, totally tax-free. So that's the third bucket. The fourth bucket is gifts. There are allowances in, the financial code that allows people to be able to give certain gifts, tax-free. And then, of course, I talked about gambling, non-professional gambling can be tax-free. And then, of course, winning the lottery can also be tax-free. But for me, those buckets, at least the first 3, your home, tax-free savings account, life insurance are things people need to have a bit more understanding. That's where education comes in.
Education is
to be able to then, take advantage of them.
Quick pause before we jump back into the episode. This podcast is about building wealth on your terms, and for a lot of people, that includes real estate. So if you're interested in real estate and want to connect, check the link in the description box or show notes. If you find this podcast valuable and you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like button and subscribe button. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give us a follow and leave a 5-star review for us. Back into real estate,
Yes.
when it comes to scaling, you definitely, because now I'm kind of in the real estate space. I have a lot of investor friends. I'm an investor myself. And I know that when it comes to people who have scaled like yourself, for me, I just have a triplex, 3 units. But when it comes to scaling, partnerships, you have to partner with people. You have to do joint venture to reduce your risk, basically. And I know in our community, sometimes people are scared of partnering with others. What do you think, or what would you say to people? What do you think this is stopping people, and how can people move past that?
Yes. So this is certainly one area that I'm very passionate about. And one of the things I'm passionate about, both in healthcare and also in real estate, is just risk management. So I'll talk about that because this is an area that is important, particularly for our community. And when I say our community, I describe myself as part of the community of the Afro-Global community. So we're Afro-Global, we know what our heritage entails and things like that. And that sometimes is a challenge for the reasons that you've mentioned. But to scale, especially in real estate, and scaling is both in terms of acquisitions, scaling both in terms of income, scaling both in terms of impact. So you have to think about it in all those domains. And you have to realize that there are a few key things that you will know. Again, education and mindset is important, but then partnerships and the use of leverage is important. Because the more you scale, you're definitely going to have to use leverage. And leverage, I usually look at leverage in 3 different ways. There is financial leverage, there is human resource leverage, so there's time leverage. So when you hear things like which I don't usually like using that term, but I'll mention it. When you hear terms like OPM, other people's money, they're talking about financial leverage. I had a different term. I came up with a completely different term for it. I still call it OPM, but I call it other pots of money. So it means the same thing. It's just that you're going to use other pots of money, money from other sources. And the reason why I came up with that was I just found other people's money a bit cheeky. Saying, I'm going to use other people's money to make money. So those people don't know how to use their money to make money.
But, you're the smarter person.
Yeah, exactly. So, and because in the real estate world, people were throwing it around anyhow, and I was like, don't go around saying you're using other people's money. Just go around and say you're using other pots of money. So anyway, so leverage is very important, and leverage has to go with partnerships. Now, with partnerships, I want to strongly encourage people who will be listening to this that real estate still stands the test of time with one of the asset classes and wealth building machines where partnership can be very straightforward, it can be well set up, it can be well risk managed, and it can yield a lot of returns. Remember, I've talked about the 10 profit centers or 10 impact centers of real estate investing. But think about it. When you have more abstract businesses, like active or passive businesses, or investing in the markets, or insurance, or any of the other things I've talked about, generally, when it comes to real estate, it can be very clear. If you're buying a property, how much did Mr. X bring to the table? How much did Miss X bring to the table? And their ownership of the property, the equity stake in that property, is going to be a function of how much they brought to the table. So it can be very clear. So really, the first point has to be looking at the deal, looking at the numbers. Does the deal work out? Then when you now start looking at the people who are coming together to partner, a few things to think about. One is that you need to have a very good legal structure. So whether it's going to be a corporation that will hold the building and then you're all shareholders, or whether you're going to have a joint venture agreement that is drawn up by a lawyer that knows exactly what they're doing, because not every lawyer is a real estate lawyer.
Yeah.
So you want to go to a real estate lawyer, just like not every doctor is a neurosurgeon.
Yeah.
Not every accountant is a real estate accountant. In fact, I tell people I have 3 accountants. They don't understand why. One of my accountants is a real estate accountant.
Just for real estate specific.
Yes, because they're good. They know what they do. They, in that area. Yeah. So you want to look for a lawyer that can draw up that can set up a structure, whether it's going to be a straightforward corporate structure, whether you're going to use a general partner, limited partner, which is a limited partnership structure, or whether you're going to use a joint venture structure. Most people who are starting with partnerships, small partnerships, would do maybe a joint venture structure. Yeah. But I generally would encourage people to move a bit more into a corporate structure when they are ready to have a corporation, and then the shareholders or partners will be shareholders of the corporation, just because of some of the benefits of a corporation.
Yeah.
So having structure is very important. Having legal input and advice, extremely important, so that everybody knows how much they brought to the table. Everybody knows how the corporation is going to be run or how the building is going to be run. Everybody knows what the medium to long-term goal is.
Yeah.
Because you have to be on the same page. Yeah. Are you coming into this partnership with an expectation to exit in 3 years? If that's the case, then there needs to be a clause there. Like most of our agreements would say there's a lock-in period, either 3 years or 5 years. Yeah. So you can't exit in that period. You need to know it from scratch.
Yes.
And except if there's a life emergency or something really major, and then everybody needs to agree that you can exit, and then they will either buy you out or you bring somebody else to replace you. So there are always ways, things that are written into the agreement that will stand in court when there's dispute.
Okay.
There's no business, no venture that doesn't have risk or will potentially have dispute, because the wealthiest people in the world will tell you that there were times when they couldn't scale without partners.
Yes.
Period. Even private companies, the minute the private companies have partners, and when they go public, what are they doing? Public, when
partners,
partners, exactly. Your stockholders, shareholders are your partners.
Yeah.
So partnerships are important to scale, but it's the legal structure that you put in place. And as you start scaling, depending on what role you occupy, and for us now, we've got to the point where we come to the table as general partners.
Okay.
So we then start looking at things like autonomy and control.
Yeah.
So that, because obviously if you have way more experience and you're bringing people who are inexperienced on, they need to be able to invest some trust in you.
Yeah.
That you know what you're doing based on your track record.
Yes.
And you have to hold a bit more autonomy or control.
Yeah.
Otherwise there'll be too many captains on the ship.
Yeah.
And if there are too many captains on the ship, that could also be a problem. So that structure is important, but it may appear daunting if you're just starting, but again, if you start small. Like I have a number of young youths and young adults that are mentees, and there have been some of them where I've said, the two of you have a little down payment here, you have a little down payment here. Why not come together and look for a duplex? 500,000, 600,000, buy it together, run it together, manage it together. There's a lot that you would learn from it, and it's still easier to sell the duplex when you're ready, or the triplex or the fourplex. That's the beauty of a smaller unit. You can sell it like this if you want to.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of experience that people will get from doing that. So partnerships definitely are something we need to encourage. There are people in many different communities that encourage it, and one of the things to do is, like you're doing now, interacting people, getting to know people more. You have these discussions with people, you find out people are interested, and then you try as a group, as small groups, to raise your level of knowledge and understanding to a level where at least if I mention the term, maybe I said net operating income or I said cash flow, it wouldn't be a foreign language to the people.
Yeah.
So that then when a deal comes, you already have a pool of about 10 people or 15 people that you can go to, and you can say, I had spoken to you all about a partnership. I've now found a deal. Let's run the numbers together. And just enjoy the process, because you may run the numbers on 10 buildings and not find one.
Yeah.
But you've learned a lot from that process.
Sure. Yeah.
So partnerships definitely important. That's with people, but also partnerships with lenders.
Okay.
Which is where leverage comes in. And my key to leverage is that we all need leverage in life, whether you're leveraging spiritual health and wealth, whether you're leveraging people's mental health,
Yeah.
whether you're leveraging your physical health or the physical health of other people, whether you're leveraging people's time, whether you're leveraging relationships, whether you're leveraging skill and talent and occupation, whether you're leveraging finance. Because when you think about leverage, the first thing that people think about is financial
leverage. Yeah.
Yes. But the beauty about leverage is that it reduces your risk.
Okay.
For me, as long as you're not moving to the extreme where you're over leveraged, but once you're leveraging, so in most of the apartment buildings we'll have like, we call it capital stacking. So we have the bank.
Yeah.
We are going to leverage their resources, their expertise, their risk assessment, because the bank will risk assess. So I like that. I like the bank to put the deal through the mill.
Yeah.
So I know whether it's going to pass the test.
Yeah.
They've come in as partners. Then I may need some investor partners. Bring them in also. I'm leveraging their time, their talent,
Resources.
and their treasure, their money as the down payment they bring to the table. Then I also put mine. So I have 3 people coming to the table. And then I may decide to also even leverage, property management, a realtor, a lawyer's input. So they're not going to come in as equity partners.
Yeah.
They're going to come in, obviously, as risk assessors, as risk managers, as asset managers, but I'm still leveraging their resources and we'll just pay them. So they're not going to be equity partners. The bank is not even an equity partner. The bank,
That's
too, is
true.
just, the bank is only gaining in one way, whereas you are gaining in these 10 ways that I mentioned. So the equity partners, when a deal is well structured in real estate, the equity partners are the ones who will gain in those 10 ways that I listed. The bank is just going to gain in only one way, which is interest.
Yeah.
So even if the property quadruples in value in 2 years, the bank has no access to that equity.
Right. That's true.
But I like partnerships and I encourage partnerships in our community, starting small, understanding it and building it, because it even manages your risk. If you want to go and buy a 10-unit building or a 5-unit building or a 4-unit building by yourself, all well and good, but that means you're carrying 100% risk.
That's great, like a lot of risk to carry, yeah.
And why take all that money and put your egg in one basket when
basket.
you can spread it out and be partners with others? So that's in terms of actually acquiring the asset.
Okay.
But there are other areas of real estate where people can invest, like public REITs and private REITs, particularly like apartment REITs.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some really good ones in Canada, like Centurion,
Ryokan.
like Skyline, like Ryokan, like Equidon, where, you can pack some money in as long as it's in a particular asset class that you understand. I mean, I understand the apartments, the multifamily apartment class. So, as long as I can see the track record and understand what's been done in that industry or that company, I can say, well, that's a passive way of investing rather than taking on the responsibility of owning the building completely. So it's a way to start small and understand, or at least be mentored by people along those lines.
That's
so yeah,
good. I used to be bullish on real estate. A lot of people, especially younger people, feel like real estate isn't it anymore. Because years ago, we felt like real estate was it. That's how a lot of millionaires built wealth. And I was talking to someone recently and they felt like real estate is just not it anymore. So what's your take on it? Do you still feel like
100%.
it still has its potential?
Absolutely. It definitely still has its potential in so many different ways. Again, we're not talking about get rich quick schemes. Because remember, the younger generation are still very big on, how can I spend this money quickly and all that. We're talking about solid assets that will grow over time in terms of equity, will generate cash flow, may not be excessive cash flow, but at least constant, regular cash flow, and we get to a point where you can pass it on to other generations, or you can sell it, or you can refinance it to pull money out tax-free. So you have to look at both the income-generating potential, the impact potential, but you also have to always look at the tax advantage potential. What's the point in investing so much in something that is generating so much money, but you're going to pay so much tax at the end of the day?
Especially in Canada.
Yes. So you always have, again, yes, taxes are important. We all have to pay taxes. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the beautiful country and environment we live in. But some people are paying more than others.
Yeah.
And vice versa. So I think real estate is still an important asset class. But again, if you look at the 9 classes I mentioned, I would say diversification is being able to invest in all of them, but realizing that real estate still has to be a corner piece. It still has to be a foundational piece. That you have to own a few pieces of real estate either wholly or in partnerships or passively. because of all the benefits that I had mentioned earlier, and then pursue other areas. I mean, there's some people who will, talk about various income sources that they have today that's generating cash flow every month.
Yeah.
Fantastic. But what are you going to do with the cash flow? You're not going to put it under your mattress. You're not going to lock it away in an account. You still have to invest it somewhere else.
Yeah.
So you either invest it in that thing that you're doing that's generating money, but ask yourself this golden question. Do I always have to be present doing what I'm doing now to generate income? Because true wealth, real true wealth, is income that is generated, financial wealth is income that is generated when you're fast asleep.
Yeah.
Not when you're present. Not when you're constantly present. And it takes a while to get there, over time.
Yeah. I'm curious, do you have anything to leave us with when it comes to like wealth creation or wealth preservation? Just anything to wrap up with?
Yeah, so I think what I'll wrap up with is, what I think I'm passionate about at the moment and constantly think about. And it's really to look at wealth as beyond money.
Okay.
And to look at wealth in a more holistic way. And, I know I had kind of, mentioned it before, but to actually do a self-wealth assessment from time to time, which is you're looking at those 7 domains of health and wealth that we all have. And I'll go through them. Spiritual health and wealth. So you can look at them in concentric circles.
Yeah.
In fact, I actually have a logo where I have concentric circles of these 7 domains, or they can also be described, these domains of health and wealth can be described as 2 very powerful and colorful triangles encapsulated in 2 circles. That's really the description of my life and the lives of many people. And that essentially has to do with the first 3 are spiritual health and wealth, mental health and wealth, physical health and wealth. So
Those
important.
those 3 are very important.
Yes. And then the next 3 that follow on from there are relationship health and wealth, occupational or talent health and wealth, and financial health and wealth. So those are the 2 triangles or 6 concentric circles.
Yeah.
And then the 7th is time and environment. Because it's important for all of us to remember that we have 4 seasons in life.
Yeah.
We have the spring season, 0 to 25. We have the summer season, 25 to 50. We have the autumn season, which is the season that I'm in now.
Such a medical way to categorize.
Which is the season of my own life now, 50 to 75.
Yeah.
And then you have the winter season, which is 75 to 100. In fact, that winter season, some people describe it as 4 boxes of life, where each box is 25 years.
Oh, okay.
And that winter season of 75 to 100, or the 4th box of life, is what I call the bonus box.
Yeah.
Because how many people really live from 75 to 100?
Yeah.
So really, the prime years are spring and summer, which is 0 to 50, broken down into segments of 25.
Yeah.
So that's why I have that circle around the triangles to say true wealth is not all about money, because people could have enough to look after themselves, have their minimal expenses, managing their expenses, have enough to help other people, and then be healthy in relationships, be healthy physically, be healthy mentally, and then somebody has all the money in the world, multi-billionaire, doesn't have good relationships, everything is in tatters, no spiritual health or grounding, no physical health. Are they really wealthy?
That's true.
I mean, I'm sure somebody will probably comment on this post and be like, and I'll say this in Nigerian parlance, leave that one jaw, they still get money.
And people are not like the viewers, the audience.
Hopefully. So, but the truth is, when you're healthy, because I'm a physician, I know the value of health. And it's not just because I'm a physician. As a human being, we know the value of health. So when we think about health, we should think about physical, mental, and spiritual health. We should think about relationship health, how we treat people, how we interact with people. I would say relationship and reputation is far more important than money.
That's true.
And so it's important to place a lot of value on that, place a lot of value on your occupation or your talent, which really means your ability to solve people's problems, your ability to add value to people's lives, and your ability to be part of the solution to people's prayers. We should all think that way. How am I going to help someone? How am I going to be a difference in someone's life? And then, of course, the ability to manage time and this environment that God has put us in, for 100 years or plus, if we're lucky.
Yeah.
So those would be the things that I would leave, that it shouldn't just be about money. Money is important. Financial health is the sixth domain, which is important. And usually in financial health, one of the ways of evaluating financial health, which can apply to all the others, is to look at your assets and liabilities. So assets generally are those resources, either in terms of time, talent, or treasure that you have that adds value, that solves problem, that generates income. And then, of course, liabilities are the limitations, the challenges, the money you owe, and things like that. So usually when I do a financial health assessment, I look at that. I look at my assets, look at my liabilities, look at, the balance between them, and that tells you what your net worth is. But that can be applied to all the other domains. What is your spiritual net worth? What are your assets and liabilities spiritually? What are my assets and liabilities spiritually? What are my assets and liabilities mentally? What are my assets and liabilities physically? What are my assets and liabilities in relationships? What are my assets and liabilities when it comes to my occupation or my talent or my area of interest or passion? What are my assets and liabilities financially? And then what are my assets and liabilities in terms of time management? This 75 plus years that God has given us on earth, what are my assets and liabilities in managing it? So I think that would be what I would love to leave the viewers with, to think in that direction.
I love that holistic view of wealth, because sometimes people, maybe they're in a situation where they're not necessarily building financial wealth just because of the situation they're in or the condition. Maybe they just immigrated from Nigeria, for example, to Canada, and they're in that grind season where they're living hand to mouth or so. But it's like, how do you then build wealth in these other areas while you're trying to even build that financial wealth? So I love that holistic view.
Yes,
I love it.
I completely agree with you. And that takes me to this other point, which I had mentioned before about, again, along the lines of my passions about real estate. And this was an inspiration I got a while ago about human real estate, spirit, mind, and body, geographical real estate being land, buildings, and water. But the thought about heavenly real estate, which ties in with exactly what you just said now, which is there are people who are serving people. There are people who are making a difference in people's lives. They may not be the wealthiest people. But if we remember, and His Majesty, one of the greatest figures that ever walked the face of the earth, said quite clearly, lay up treasures for yourself in heaven, where no thief can break in. Nothing would happen to that wealth. And what people don't realize, especially people of, what people don't think about, but people realize, is that when you're investing in people, when you're making a difference in people's lives, even if you don't have all the money in the world, and I do understand that, yes, you need money to make that difference, but people are making a difference even without having so much money. Because even giving somebody a smile, a handshake, and a hug, and a kind word, sometimes is way better than even giving someone $10. So for me, that's a way of investing in heavenly real estate, to think about providence, to think about, provision, to think about posterity. And the truth is, again, maybe it's because, I'm of that Christian faith and I think that way. When Christ said, look, in my Father's house, there are many mansions there. If it were not so, I would have told you. He was literally talking about buildings. He wasn't talking about, something abstract. But then he's basically saying, the more you invest in the kingdom, which essentially means the more you invest in people. Because everything we've talked about today, and everything we set out to do every day, all comes back to one thing: people. And that's why I have this, this mantra called people are precious, because it always comes down to people. Whether you're building wealth or you're creating wealth, ultimately it will come down to people. Who are the people around you? Who are the people you're helping? Who are the people's problems you're solving? And all that. So I think getting fulfillment is so important, because you may not have all the money in the world, but the lives that you touch, the people you help, the things you do, what you stand for, may give you a lot of fulfillment, and money may just be a byproduct of that.
I love that. You've dropped a lot for us, and if people want to learn more about things you want to share, how can they connect? I know you have an Instagram for Triangles of Impact.
So I have an Instagram handle. One of my handles in Instagram is called the Triangles of Impact. So people can follow me on that. Another one is my Instagram name, which is Buky K. So it's BUKY KAY. So there's space. So BUKY which is the pet name for my long first name.
Okay.
So Buky, and then there's a space, and then Kay. A lot of people call me Dr. K.
Okay.
But those are two Instagram handles that people have, and they can follow me on.
I would add it in the description box. So thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
And thanks for all the tips, advice, everything that you shared. I know people will find this valuable. And thanks for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. If you're listening on any podcast platform, please give us a follow and a 5-star rating.